Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. What you can see behind me is a mock slow-loading website with lots of videos and images in the hero section. And unfortunately, to Wix users, slow-loading websites is something that is quite frequent. And one of the ways that we can deal with this phenomenon, except for trying to clean and speed up our site, is to add a preloader, something like this, where the user will see some kind of animation as the site is loading, and then only after the site is fully loaded will they be shown the web page. The issue with the classical approaches that you've probably seen in your research so far is that they are timer based. So you set a certain amount of time, let's say 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, which the preloader will run for, and afterwards it shows your page. This does not customize the experience based on the actual internet connection and when the page is loaded. So it might be too long of a preloader for people with a fast connection and too short of a preloader for people with a slow connection. What I want to explore today is creating a preloader where, if for example, we go over here to network, and then we decide to throttle the network by changing it here from, let's say, a fast 4G to a 3G, and then reloading the site, we will see that the preloader actually stays on for longer because this is a slower loading site. You can see even the preloader itself is a little slow. That's because I'm using a GIF here. You can use something else here as the animation in the background, but you can see here that the preloader is now showing for much longer than it was originally, and that's because I am at a slower connection. Whereas when I was on a faster connection, the preloader disappeared within just a few seconds. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. So if you want to learn how to do all that and more, let's get started. Okay, so for today's demonstration, I am using a Wix Classic site, and this is not just any Wix Classic site. This is a dev site that you can create for testing apps and stuff like that. And the reason I'm using it is because it acts just like a premium Wix website. And many of the techniques that we are going to implement and explore today require you to have a premium site in order to use, such as custom code, custom elements, etc. So to follow along with this tutorial, either you'll also need to be using a dev site, or you will also need to upgrade your site to premium, with a slight caveat that if the custom element approach that we are going to try ends up working, technically there's a workaround that you can do using blocks, but I don't want to get into it right now. So let's just assume for now that we're working with a premium Wix website. The problem that we are trying to tackle is the fact that, in general, websites can sometimes take some time to load, especially if you have media or very large content up on top, like videos, images, etc. And specifically, Wix is known to. Wix is great at a lot of things, but it does have a speed issue, especially if your site gets very large and you add on regular things that can slow your site down. It can load sometimes slowly, and a solution to this, with the understanding that there's a limit to how much you can speed up your site, is that you will have some sort of preloader. So an animation or something that happens on the screen while all the elements of the page are loading, so that the user still has an experience of something happening, maybe some branding or whatnot, and they're not stuck on a web page which just seems to be loading very slowly. So that's what we're going to try and implement today. In terms of the approaches that we're going to take, so I'm going to start off with the classic approach, or the approach that you might have seen if you've already done some research into how to create preloaders from Wix, and that is the approach that uses custom code in the dashboard. So if you go over here to settings and you scroll down over here to custom code, then here we have the option to embed essentially HTML code into our web page. And there are some code snippets going around online or whatnot that when you put them in here, essentially what it does is it will create a preloader, so essentially just an element that covers the rest of the page while everything else is loading underneath, and these are usually timer based. So you set the amount of time, and based on after that time expires, the preloader will disappear. So I want to implement that one first because it will serve as a good starting point for our preloader that I'm hoping to kind of level up in terms of what it can do. And it'll also give us an understanding of how these preloaders are built. So we're going to be building ours from scratch. We're not going to copy a code snippet from somewhere online. And hopefully that will be of value to you when you are creating and tweaking your own preloader. So for the sake of building our preloader, I am using CodePen. It's kind of like an online IDE, and it has a display here on the right which shows what the code will actually look like once it's rendered. So here is where we're going to write our HTML, and even though we're going to have some JavaScript, it's all going to be written in HTML form because that's what we can put inside of the custom codes in the settings in Wix. So let's think for a second what we want to have. So essentially, we want to have some kind of element that's going to cover the entire screen. So I'm going to start off, let's say, with a div. And this div, whoops, this is where I want to zoom to. This div will give, let's say, an ID so that we can easily select it in our JavaScript, and we'll call it preloader. And we're going to want to give some styling to this div as well. So either we can add a style sheet, so like go over here and add a style sheet. We could also technically do this with JavaScript, but let's do it with a style sheet for now. So style. And this is going to be an important part because this is essentially going to dictate the fact that our preloader is going to cover the screen, maybe what color it is, maybe we're going to add a little bit of an animation to it, and the fact that it needs to display over everything else that's on our screen. So I'm going to select the preloader by ID, like that, and start giving it some styling. So in terms of height and width, I'm going to start off with 100 view height, and width we'll do 100 view width, and hopefully that will keep it covering the entire screen. And let's give it a background color. So background color, background color. And let's say, for example, now I'll just make it like a really ugly red, just to see if we actually see it now. Okay, so there we go. There we go. There's our preloader. And I'm already noticing some things. So you'll notice there's like a bit of a margin here. That's keeping the preloader from covering the entire screen, which is a little annoying. We can investigate that in a moment. And let's, for example, let's put another div here. And we're put a div that will simulate the rest of our website. So we want to make sure that this preloader is displaying above everything else. So let's go ahead and I'm going to add in another div. And this div will just say, hello world. And at the moment, since we haven't given any styling, so this div is appearing over here on the bottom, but that's not what we want. So that means we need to make some changes to our preloader so that it's not in line with everything else, but it's essentially above everything else. So one thing I'm going to change is I'm going to change the display to be absolute. Or no, sorry, position to be absolute, position, let's do absolute. And let's see for a second if that helps us. Yeah, okay, so now our preloader is covering our other div. Okay, we can't see it here. I'm also going to give it a very high index. So let's give it a z-index. Let's give it a z-index now of, let's say, 1,000 to start with, just in case we have anything else on the screen, and we want to make sure that it's going to be above those things. So this is looking pretty good for now. We still need to figure out this little margin here. The problem is that that might actually have to do with the body itself, and it's a little hard to investigate these kinds of things in CodePen. Let me try opening up. Let me try opening up here. So here we have, yeah, the body. So the body here seems to have some kind of margin. So yeah, let's see what happens if I get rid of the body margin. So here in the style, I'll say body, and let's say margin 0. Yeah, so that got rid of it. This is a little dangerous because I don't know what kind of side effects that might have on our website. So we'll have to see how this looks within Wix itself. We might not even need this within Wix because this might have just been like a CodePen technicality. It could be that Wix by default already sets the body to the margin of the body to 0. So I can't be sure that we need that, but let's keep it in for now just in case. And this, I mean, it seems pretty simple, but this is essentially what a preloader is. It's just a big blank piece of nothingness that sits over um, the rest of what we have. One thing I would want to make sure of is that, for example, if our page was long, which like longer, like the height of the page was essentially larger than the height of our screen, which is what the preloader is set to, how the preloader would behave in that scenario. That's one thing I'd want to verify. So what I'll do is I'll go over here to our Hello World div, and I'll just add some inline styling so it doesn't interfere with the rest of the styling that we have. And let's just say height, and I'll make it something like really high. Let's say, I don't know, 2000 pixels. That should be good enough. And then, yeah, so here you'll see that it added scroll bars here to the side. So when I scroll, you'll see that our preloader scrolled along with the rest of the page, which is not what we want. So this is exactly what I wanted to double check. So we want this, this preloader to always be sticky. So that would be something with display, I think. Display, maybe display fixed. I think that's it. Let's try. No. Display sticky. Oh man, it's been a long time since no, that doesn't look right. Display. Oh, maybe it's display fixed. But I think when you put display fixed, you also need to have, we also need to have a top, let's say top 0, left 0. So like pin it kind of to the top left in terms of the positioning. Let's see if that works. No, that didn't work. Okay, I need to hit Google. I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I found it pretty quickly on MDN, and I was very close. So I was looking for fixed, but it's not in display. It's actually in position. So instead of our position absolute, what we have over here, essentially, we just need this to be position fixed. And then hopefully that should do the trick. Yeah, so now you see that even as I scroll the page, the preloader is still covering the entire page. Another concern I might have is like whether if the size of the screen gets adjusted, like if the size of the window gets adjusted, if the preloader will adjust to that. I think so, because we set a dynamic height and width based essentially on the viewport. So if that changes, I think that it should change as well, but we can double check that once we do the implementation on Wix. So the next thing we're going to want to do is essentially to get rid of our preloader because it's not meant to be there forever. but we actually want it to go away once the page loads. And as I said, our initial approach to this will be a time-based approach. So essentially, we're going to write some JavaScript that will set a timer and will hide or remove our preloader once a certain amount of time passes. Okay, so let's get started with our script, and I'm going to write it here right under our div. So let's just add in here script and add the closing tag, just to not forget, script. And in here, we're going to write some JavaScript. So what I want to do, first of all, is I want to select our preloader. So let's say const preloader equals to document dot get element by ID, and we're going to select it by the preloader ID. And once we have it selected, essentially what we could do is we can say preloader dot style dot, and now I need to remember, I think display equals to none. And that should make our preloader disappear. As you can see here, our preloader is now gone because this JavaScript is running and setting the display to none. We don't want this to happen immediately, of course. We want to set some kind of timeout. So what we'll do here is we'll set a timeout. So set timeout. And this is going to take a callback function. And it's going to take a certain amount of time. So let's declare this as a global variable here. So I'll say const loading time. And let's have it equal to, how long should it be? Let's say initially 15 seconds. So I'll do 15 times 1,000 because time in JavaScript is measured in milliseconds. So 15 times 1,000 will essentially be 15 seconds. And that is what I'll set here as the time for our timeout. So this will be our loading time. Awesome. And here inside of the, it's kind of weird that this didn't change color. I don't know all the rules here of the coloring inside of CodePen, but, oh no, but here also preloader is yellow. Okay, I won't get too worried. Set timeout, and essentially what we want to do in this timeout is set our display of the preloader to none. So a timeout is essentially like a timer in JavaScript, so it means that after whatever we set the time here, which is 15 seconds, run whatever code we have inside of the function here. So that means that our page will load, the preloader will be there, and then 15 seconds later, it should disappear. Like you just saw here. I was kind of zoomed in, so it might not have been so clear, but you saw that it was red in the beginning, and then 15 seconds later, that disappeared. So now that we're done writing our code, we can go ahead and grab it all, except for this div here. We don't want this hello world div, but all of this code that we wrote over here. And I'm going to copy it and head over to our settings in Wix, and I'm just going to add this as the custom code here in the head. And let's call this preloader. And yeah, so load code once on all pages, let's say. You can also have the preloader only on specific pages if you want, and in the head. So let's go ahead and apply that, and this should already be applied on our site. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to View Site, and let's see if our preloader kicks in. Doesn't seem to, it doesn't seem to be working. And I shouldn't need to publish the site for this code to work. Let's go over here and see for a second. Let me publish just in case. Just want to make sure that's not, it shouldn't be related because you don't need to publish new custom code. But I just want to make sure. I hope it's not related to the fact that it's a dev site because that would be a bit of a bummer. But let's go ahead over here. Let's see. Let's inspect. Let's go here to elements and we'll try and find, let me do a search here for preloader. Okay, so we do have the code in here. The preloader is here, and I see the style. Why do I only see the style? That's weird. Okay, maybe I made some kind of mistake with copy pasting. Let's even I can't even copy paste. Let's see, style, body. No, here. I see here the div. Oh, because maybe because I put it okay. Yeah, because I put it in the head, and I guess you can't have a div in the head. So let me put it here instead on body start, and let's see if that does anything. So body start, and my concern in body start is that I hope that it loads quick enough and it actually acts as a preloader. Let's see. So I'm going to refresh this page. Yeah, nothing seems to be happening. This is pretty odd. Let me just take a look again at the code. Console. Sorry, elements. Let's look. Let me search for our preloader. Okay, so here now I see the div. Oh, but why is it set to display none already? That's weird. That's weird. Okay, so I have a hunch here as to why this is happening. Because Wix Wix actually renders your page twice. So it renders it once on the server side, and then it renders it another time on the client side. So what might be happening here is that when they rendered this on the server side, it preset the style here to be none. Sorry, the like display to be none. And then when the page loaded, it it loads the it doesn't load the preloader because it's set to be display none. So what I'm going to try and do, let me try and add in a line of code inside of our script that will set the the display to be, I guess, block. And that way, as soon as the script loads on the client side, even if the display was originally none, then it'll change it back to block. Let's try and see if that solves that issue. So I'm going to change this here to block. Okay, so what I'm thinking is that when it renders on the server side, it will change it to display none, but then when it loads again on the client side, it'll change it to block and then back to none. Let me test out this hypothesis. So let me copy this, and I'm going to head back to the settings, and I'm just going to paste in our new code here, hit apply, and let's head here back to our site, and I'm going to give it a reload. No, that did not seem to fix it. Let me double check the code here. So let's search for preloader. Okay, so here the display is set to block. And then, oh, there we go. We got a live we got a live view of it flashing and becoming. So that did fix it in the sense that I wanted to fix it, but still it doesn't see, we don't see the actual preloader, which is kind of odd. Which is kind of odd. Yeah, give me a moment to think about this and I'll be back with a solution. So I'm back and I figured it out and it was a pretty stupid mistake. But let me just find the preloader to show you what I did. So first of all, I set it to display block permanently. And you'll notice that when I hover over the preloader, the left side of the screen turns blue, which indicates that the element is there. So I'm like, okay, why don't we see the element? The background color red is obviously right. And we saw the element inside of our CodePen. So I opened up here the Styles panel, and I saw that there was an issue. Let me just open up for the preloader. Just a moment. Let me select the preloader, and here inside of the Styles panel, so you'll notice that there's an error here with the z-index. And I miswrote z-index indeed, because I wrote it, basically when you're writing the styles in JavaScript and you're writing them in CSS, there's a different way of writing it. So in CSS, you write it like this, like I did background color with the dash, but in JavaScript, it would have been background, no dash, then uppercase color. So I wrote the z-index in the JavaScript way and on the CSS way, and if I was just to go here and change this, let's say to z-index, how it's supposed to be, there is our preloader. So let me go ahead and fix that. First of all, inside of the CodePen. And this didn't show in the CodePen because, I guess because our preloader was the top element anyways, and just because of the other styling, like this div didn't interfere with it, but the way that Wix sets up their web pages, it was a problem. So essentially z-index wasn't working before either, but we just had no indication of it. So let me go ahead and grab this entire script here, all this HTML, and I'm going to replace what we have here in the settings with that. So let me go ahead and edit settings and put this over here. And then let's try reloading our page. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a refresh. And I still don't see it. Let me double check again. Let's see. Elements. Let me search for our preloader. And let's see. Oh, it's still the wrong z-index. Why is that? Let's see here. No, it's definitely the right z-index here. Let's see. Maybe I just need to reload a few more times. There we go. There's our preloader. Excellent. Okay, let's wait a few seconds. This is a good time to like write a comment, like the video, even though I'm making lots of mistakes and there's bugs. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and boom, our preloader is gone. Okay, so that is the basics of the classic approach to preloaders. We can talk as well about, adding in a small animation or something, but that's fluff. That's not really the essence of the preloader. So my problem with this approach to the preloader is the fact that it's just on a timer. So it doesn't really have any relationship with if the page is actually loaded or not. So our goal for today will be to create a preloader where the preloader actually stops the loading animation when the page is actually loaded. Before we move forward on my expedition for the ultimate preloader, I will show how to add, let's say, an animation or something like that to the preloader, because I know some of you might be saying, oh, I'm fine with just setting the amount of seconds and just show me how to make a preloader and we'll be done with it. So to appease those of you who are in that mindset, let's first set the animation here for this preloader. And I'll be doing it using a background image. And essentially what we could do here is we can load an image from a URL. So I'm going to have here a URL. And I'm going to just paste a URL of a GIF from Giphy. I'm just going to paste that right over there. And let's see what that does for us in terms of loading there. Oh, okay. So it's animating. There are animations going on. Not exactly what I had in mind. So we have to make a few adjustments. I also see that this image doesn't seem to be transparent, but you could probably get a transparent GIF. So let's look into how we can kind of make that GIF not kind of repeat all over and be centered in the middle. Since this is kind of getting to the edge of the CSS that I know by heart, I ChatGPT this one. So what I think we need are these two properties. So background repeat, no repeat, and background position center. And as you can see here, now we just have one version of our animation and it's centered in the middle. It's still a little ugly because it doesn't have a transparent background, but that's really just a technicality. So let me get rid of these. Let me get rid of these beautiful ChatGPT explanations here. And this is going to be our starting point for our custom element approach, which will hopefully allow us to time the loading to when the page actually loads. So let's start off with setting up the basics of our custom element. So I'm going to go over here to add elements, and I'm going to look for embed code, and I'm going to select custom element. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put this custom element inside of the header so that it runs on all the pages of the site. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste it here in the header. And this custom element is essentially going to be invisible when it's essentially going to be our preloader. So when the preloader is showing, it'll show on the whole screen. And when it's not showing, this custom element will not be visible to the naked eye. So let's go ahead and choose a source. And I'm going to choose here Velo file. And I'm going to create a new Velo file. I'm going to get rid of everything that we have here in the middle. And let's start by creating our custom element class. So it's going to be class, and we'll call this custom preloader extends HTML element. And in here, we're going to have constructor, and we're going to have super. I have a tutorial all about custom elements, so if any of this seems like gibberish to you, pause, go search the channel for a custom element, and you'll have like an introductory tutorial to custom elements where I explain all this stuff. But now I'm assuming like some basic knowledge. And after the constructor, let's have the connected callback function right over here. And essentially what we're going to want to do is here we're going to want to construct our preloader. So what I'll do is either I can attach it directly or I can have a shadow DOM. I'm going to try without a shadow DOM first because I don't want any kind of interference in terms of loading the preloaders. Let's try without a shadow DOM first. So what I will do is I will just grab our custom code here, our HTML, and I'm going to go back to our custom element. Nope, not there, custom element. And what I'll do is I'll say this dot inner HTML equals to, and I'll open up backticks here. I know it's hard to see in the tutorial, but it's not single quotation marks, it's backticks. And I'm just going to paste everything that we have over here. Before I forget, let me just call the define over here. So custom elements dot define, and here we're going to have the tag. So let's call this custom preloader, and we're going to pass in our custom preloader class right over there. So at this moment, this custom element, if I'm not mistaken, should behave exactly like the preloader that we built with custom code. So I just want to test that hypothesis. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, make sure that our custom element is fully connected. So again, choose source, and let me rename I'm going to rename the file to something a little more indicative. So let's call this file custom preloader. And then here inside of our custom element, so choose source custom preloader, and here in the tag name, it also should be custom preloader. And this always is a little glitchy, but there, I don't know, oh, you guys didn't see it because I was zoomed in probably, but there was like a flash of, oh yeah, so this is, you could actually see the preloader here. It's happening here inside. I mean, this is, there was like a flash of red before, and if I'm not mistaken, this is the animation playing. This is only in the editor though. In the live site, it should act as it did before. So it should expand to cover the entire screen. Just it has to do with the difference with how custom elements are presented or how they're programmed in the editor versus on a live site. Won't get into it now. It's not so related to our topic. But let's go ahead. So I'm going to publish this. And I'm also going to turn off our preloader here from the dashboard. Okay, so this preloader is off, so it shouldn't be working. And now if we do have a preloader on our site, that should be an indication that our custom element is working. And that seems to be working. And another way that I know that this is the custom element and not our previous preloader is the fact that it has this animation, which our old preloader, I don't think I updated the dashboard preloader with the animation. So this is an indication that this is actually our custom element behaving as a preloader. A few things that I notice here is that there are some things that are being displayed above the preloader. It could be that the z-index that I said is just not high enough, so I would need to check what the z-index of these elements are, and then change the z-index of the preloader so it definitely loads above all those other things. This is also like the longest 15 seconds ever. I don't feel like it's disappearing. Let's see. I mean, if you haven't liked the video yet, you should definitely be liking it now, because we're making progress. Okay, so for some reason the preloader is just continuously preloading. Let's try and inspect here and see why that might be. Let's go ahead and see here. Elements. Okay, so here's our preloader. You can see here that it's inside of our custom element as well, the custom preloader element. And okay, so one thing that I see isn't happening is that it's not changing the display to be none, essentially. So maybe this script isn't running correctly or something along those lines. So let's take a look and see. Let me add a console log. We don't have any, do we have any errors here? No, we don't have any errors. So let me go into our, well, to be honest, this is something that I was planning on changing anyways, because we want to make our script more dynamic now, which means we don't want the preloader to disappear when time runs out. We want the preloader to disappear when we tell it to, essentially. So this is something I was planning on changing anyways. So we might figure it out as we go along, but definitely we have it fundamentally working. So let's go ahead and see how we are going to change this essentially to work not on a time-based system, but on a trigger-based system. So essentially we could just tell this custom element, stop the preloading now. So in order to implement our triggered preload termination, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get rid of this script actually, because we don't really need this script. What we're going to need is a new script that we're going to write inside, that we're going to write inside a method inside of our custom element. So here we have our connected callback, and under this, I'll add an additional method here, and let's call this one stop preloader. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to want to select our preloader. So we'll have document.get element by ID. And it's going to be the preloader. We don't need that beforehand, just like that, because it's already by ID. And let's assign this to a variable const preloader. So this is pretty similar to what we did before. Could have probably even copy pasted some of the code, but let's have a fresh slate. Once we get the preloader, what I'll do is I'll add a console log just to make sure that it's correctly selected. This is based on the bug that we had before. I just want to make sure that everything is working in here. And once we select the preloader, we're going to say preloader.style.display equals to none. Okay, that's pretty much all this stop preloader method needs to do. Now we need to figure out how we're going to trigger this stop preloader method based on when our page finishes loading. And this means essentially we're going to need to communicate from Velo code into our custom element, because only our Velo code on our site will know when our page is completed loading. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to observe an attribute here. So let's add here static get observed attributes. And I'm going to return an array which will have, let's say, an attribute called stop. Okay? Or let's, let's say loaded. And this will be the attribute that indicates that our site has loaded. And we are going to need to essentially change this attribute. And when this attribute changes, we're going to call our stop preloader method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in another lifecycle callback, it's called, like this connected callback. And I think it's called, I'm pretty sure it's called attribute changed callback. This might be my downfall, this assumption here. And this will take a few variables. So it's going to take name, old value, and new value. And essentially what we want to do is say that if name equals to loaded, and we could also say, yeah, if name equals to loaded, then what we're going to do is we'll do this dot stop preloader. So it doesn't really even matter to us what the value of loaded is. As soon as that attribute gets changed, that will be our indication that everything has loaded. So yeah, I think this is all we need inside of the custom element. But on the Velo side, we are going to need to write some code to change the attribute of our custom element. And this I'm going to write in the master page. Again, this is because I want the preloader to work on all pages. If you want the preloader to work just on a single page, then it might be relevant to do the code that I'm doing now on that page itself. Here in the master page, so first thing I'll do, I've selected the custom element. I'm going to change its name over here to preloader. And then here inside of the onReady function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our preloader. Zoom in so you can see preloader. And I'm going to say dot set attribute. And we'll set the loaded attribute. And let me just set it to be, let's say, true. It really doesn't matter what I put here, because anything that I put here will change the attribute from null to something else. So that is pretty much all we should need to do in order to stop our preloader. And the advantage here is that this code should really only run when the page is completed loading. And imagine that if we had more logic here inside of our onReady function, we could put this preloader set attribute all the way on the bottom, so that it would fire off only when all of that code ran. It's important to note that this is the master page and not the page code itself. And I'm blanking out for now at the moment of which one runs first, whether it's the master page or the page code, but that could also have an implication as to where you actually want to set the attribute as loaded. But either way, assuming that this works, the power of determining when the preloader will stop is in our hands. So let's go ahead and test this out and make sure that it's working on a basic level. So I'm going to go ahead and publish the site. And once the site is published, we'll head over to the live site. And let me go ahead and reload this. And okay, so our preloader came up. There is a slight delay in the preloader coming up, which is a little bit concerning. But let's first see if the preloader stops at all. Because if it doesn't, then we have a bit of a problem. Let's see here. Custom preloader doesn't seem to be stopping. Let's take a look at our console log. Okay. Cannot read properties of null, reading style. Preloader null. Okay, so there is an issue with selecting the preloader. Why is that? The ID is preloader. Let's take a look over here. It could be that it's a matter of using the shadow DOM or not. Document.getElement by ID preloader. It is happening in the connected callback. ID equals to preloader. So let me try and use a shadow DOM. So let me do here inside of uh, the connected callback. I don't see why a shadow DOM. I don't see why a shadow DOM should make a difference here, but let's try it out. This dot attach shadow and we can have here, let's say, mode open. And I will say const shadow equals to this new shadow DOM. And then instead of doing this dot inner HTML, we'll do shadow dot inner HTML. Let's see if that helps. I'm somewhat skeptical, but let's see. I'm gonna give this a refresh. Yeah, so preloader is still null. Let me make sure that we're actually using the shadow DOM. So let me look here for the preloader. Okay, custom preloader loaded equals true. Shadow root. Yeah, we are using a shadow DOM here. So that wasn't a matter of a shadow DOM. Okay, it might be just I have like a small, again, like what happened with this Z index. So give me a moment. I'm going to figure this out and I'll be right back. Okay, so after about 15 minutes of playing around and investigating almost every possible angle I could think of, I realized that the issue might be similar to the problem that we were encountering originally, where the preloader started off as display equals none. And that has to do with again, the fact that Wix has double rendering essentially, that it renders server side and then client side. So what might have been happening is that because this set attribute, as you can tell, the code here changed a bit, but as this set attribute just runs in the onReady function out of the box, so there's nothing that triggers it. That means that technically it runs on the server side as well. So what I think was happening is that our custom element was loading to begin with the attribute of loaded set to true, which obviously would throw an error when it couldn't locate the actual preloader itself because it was essentially triggering too early. Something along those lines. I hope I didn't confuse you, but basically the solution was to limit this setting of the loaded attribute to only be in the browser. So when you're using, so in Wix, in order to counteract these side effects that can happen because of the dual rendering, Wix gives us access to the rendering environment, and that's through Wix window frontend. So all I did was import Wix window frontend and tap into .rendering.env, and I said that only when the environment equals to browser versus, I think the other option is backend. But only when it equals to browser, then we'll set the attribute loaded to true. And now if we take a look at the live site, I'm just going to give it a refresh. So we see the loader appears for a second, then it disappears. And this is because our page loaded quite quickly, so we didn't really need a very long loading time. And this is actually what we're going for because we don't want to stick the user in a preloader if they don't actually need to be. So we don't want to stick them there for 20 seconds just because we have to choose a time and we don't know exactly how long it's going to take our site to load. We'd rather get them out of the preloader as soon as possible, and that's what we've achieved to some extent. I would want to do a little more testing, so try and kind of throw in some elements here that might take a long time to load and test the loader a little bit more. There's also another issue that I want to try and tackle is the fact that it takes also a second for our preloader to show up. And this wasn't an issue that we had so much when we were doing it with the custom code. So one approach that might be useful here is a hybrid approach. So essentially, instead of having it just as custom code in the dashboard or just as a custom element, we can utilize both and have our custom element essentially communicate with our custom code in the dashboard. So let's hop in and explore those different options. So to really test out our preloader and see if it's doing what we want it to do, I've set up a test here where, first of all, I've put like a video and a bunch of images here in the header. So it's things that would take a long time to load. And also I'm going to go over here to network. And here we have the option to introduce throttling. So like to simulate a slower network connection and see what happens. So let me go here with, let's say 3G, which is pretty slow. And I'm going to go over here and hit refresh and see how our page loads in a slower network connection. So what I see that's happening is our preloader is not loading. And the video loaded pretty quickly. The images are taking a bit of time. And let's wait a second and see if and when our preloader kicks in. So we've been loading the page now for about 20 seconds based on this progression here on the side. And then boom, our preloader hits. So this must have to do with when Wix loads in custom elements. So let's try and run this same test with the preloader that was inside of our dashboard. So let's go ahead, and what I'll do is I will go back to our editor, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just delete our custom element so that it's not there anymore, and I'll publish the site. And then I will go here to our settings, and what I'll do is I will turn on this preloader that we had before. And let's head back to the live site and let's see if this preloader loads earlier than the custom element preloader. So I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh. And boom. So this preloader that was inside of our custom code in the dashboard loaded as soon as the site loaded, okay? And this should probably turn off I think this one is still set off to turn off automatically after 15 seconds. So that preloader did what it was supposed to in terms of loading on time, but it didn't really do what it was supposed to in terms of turning off on time. So now let's take a look at setting up a hybrid approach where the initial loading of the preloader happens from our dashboard custom code, but we can turn off the preloader through a custom element inside of our editor. So let's start off with the adjustments to the code here in our preloader inside of our dashboard. So I'm going to go over here and edit settings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the script. Okay, the script is essentially what turns off our preloader. So I'm going to get rid of the script, and then here essentially what we have is just code to HTML to load a preloader and indefinitely. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here inside of the dashboard. Inside of our editor, I'm going to add our custom element back in, like so. And we're going to go into our custom preloader code here, and we're going to make some changes. So first of all, we're not going to create the preloader here. So I'm going to get rid essentially of all this code here in the connected callback. And we essentially don't even really need the connected callback. Instead, what we're going to do is we're just going to stop the preloader from within the custom element. And since the preloader is in the DOM from our what's the custom code inside of the dashboard, this still should work in the same way in terms of selecting the element by ID and setting the display to none. So I've published our site with all of the changes. And let me go over here to the network tab. And I'm going to try and reload the site and see if this hybrid approach works. So I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh. And let's see. So we see our preloader loaded instantaneously, which is great. And let's see here how long it takes for our preloader to turn off, if it does at all. Still going, still going. Still going here. And because Wix is still loading some things here, I'm not sure exactly what. There we go. Some stuff is still loading, okay. So it's taking quite a while, and then boom. Okay, so here our preloader took about 40 seconds, just judging over here by when it stopped around here, about 40 seconds. And that means that it took about 40 seconds for our page to load completely and for the master page code on ready code to run and for the attribute to be set to off, as opposed to us setting a random permanent time and it just doing it based on that. So let me try loading the site again, because let's say now Wix has already done some caching, so the loading of the site might be a little quicker. And let's see how many milliseconds it takes now. And we can see hopefully that there's going to be some difference based on the actual performance of the site. Let me take a look here. If this doesn't actually speed up, we could also try changing the network to a slightly faster network, and then hopefully that will indicate the change. Let's see. Seems to be taking even longer than before. Okay, so it took a little quicker. I think it was a little before 40,000, which is equal to 40 seconds. So let me try, I'm going to try changing this, let's say, back to like a fast 4G and reloading. And boom. So it took like 3 seconds. But imagine that we had set up our preloader based on only the custom dashboard custom code option. That would mean that we would have to set it to either 3 seconds or 40 seconds. And that means that people with a really slow network, the preloader pretty much wouldn't do anything for them. And people if we set it to 40 seconds to cover our bases, then people with a really fast network would be sitting in front of a preloader for 40 seconds for no real reason. So this hybrid approach, while it is more complex in terms of setup, not overly complex, but a little more complex, it does give us the flexibility of having a genuine preloader that actually stops when the page has completed loading. We are going to wrap up here. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or you want to share your experience with stuff like this, or another approach that you can think of that's even better, please leave those comments in the comments. And if you want to see more videos like this every week, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.